Hi there. Welcome to a rainy day in the Northeast in the Washington, D.C. area. This is Janice Walk-Grenadier with JudicialPedia.com podcast radio, and we hope you're watching us and enjoying us. And I am so excited today. I have one of my favorite people on, and it's Liz Johnson. And Liz Johnson and I go, I don't know how many years back.
Oh,
but
they'll think, if you don't tell them, they'll think we're 21.
We are 21. We are 21. I'm sure of that in our mindset. And because we're fighting as if we're 21. We're fighting for justice. As I've talked before about is, Liz is right there with me. She knows the Constitution. She is in Maryland. She's aware of the Maryland Constitution. She's aware of our fundamental rights to justice in the United States when we walk into a courtroom. She is aware of and has come to some of my court hearings. I've been a guest at some of her court hearings that she has people that she's worked with. She's also aware of some of the difficulties with the judiciary, the executive branch, and the legislature. She, I believe, supports the grand jury, access to the grand jury for all of us as the fourth arm of government that our forefathers gave us. Liz is an expert in housing. She is the head chairperson in Maryland for the Prince George's County NAACP. And she has also founded Strategic Housing Solutions. So she knows there's a problem and she's fighting that problem, but she's also looking for solutions for that problem. And so, Liz, I want you to be able to tell people, because you can say it so much more gracefully than I can, as to what you're doing.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Janice. I really appreciate it. As you said, I am the chairperson for the Prince George's County NAACP, and we in this county we were really touted as the most wealthy Black county in the United States of America some years ago. But then suddenly came the 2008 crash, where 65,000 homes since that time have been lost here in this county due to foreclosures. So I was a victim myself. Really didn't know what was going on when all this happened. And I just wasn't content to just, lay down and just take it laying down. So I wanted to know what was going on. Found out that Prince George's County was redlined. And just in case most of your listeners are not familiar with redlining, and don't mean to insult the intelligence of those who do, the industry literally drew a red line on a map around a certain area. And in that area, only certain kinds of loan documents were really offered to people whenever they signed a mortgage. And some of those products were adjustable rate mortgages, the ninja loans, no income, no job, stated income, pick a payment, interest only. Those were the kinds of products they were offered to people in that area. And
a lot of times those are considered predatory loans.
I'm sorry?
Predatory loans, which
those were predatory loans, because a lot of them had teaser rates for interest whenever people first went in to apply for the loan. They had teaser rates, like 2 or 3% interest. And people just felt that when they were offered these, that they were going to be able to afford this loan long term. But what happened is, as this year was like 2%, 2 more years it was 4%, then it was 6%, and finally got to the point where people simply could not afford the loans. As a matter of fact, a little earlier you spoke of hearings that we had, and we've been to each other's hearings, and you're in Virginia, I'm in Maryland, but you came to my hearings before the legislature, and we had a delegate, which is our lower house here in Maryland. One of the delegates even said himself that he was a victim because he had been given a loan, felt that he could really afford it, and he too was priced out of the house until he got a modification from Bank of America, which of course modifications is a whole nother subject. you see.
But he didn't just get a modification. He was a person that was on the committee, and they took his loan and they cut it in half. They adjusted
so that his payments were much lower once he got the modification. But what some people,
the modification wasn't just the interest rate. The modification was like, say he had like a $750,000 loan, I believe he said, and his loan after they had modified it was like around $250,000.
Exactly. But in that I didn't see it, but with a lot of the modifications that I've seen, what people don't really realize is that 99% of them have these huge balloon payments. So that in one person that we've seen, her balloon payment is like $202,000 in 2026. So that in 2026, she has to pay that entire $202,000, or she's going to be foreclosed on, or she's going to lose the house. And see, that is what's happening with so many of our loans, is that people don't really realize when they read their modification, they many times don't understand it. And my favorite mantra is to say, what the large print giveth, the small print taketh away. And a lot of people don't get to the small print.
Well, a settlement in a lawyer's office, you're given 1 hour. They're usually stacked up. Usually when you go in, you're given about an hour, and people are telling you, you don't pay, you don't stay. You don't need to read the small print. Very few people are actually given the opportunity, are given the suggestion even to read the entire thing.
Well, the thing of it is, Janice, is that 99% of the population, even if you read it, you don't know what's hidden in the verbiage. You know, when they say may instead of can, or may instead of shall. So that you're reading it, and if you're not, even if you're an attorney, because we found out attorneys don't sometimes know what's in those many, 50-some pages of closing documents, and then when you get a modification, it's even bigger. So even if they read it, they're not really sure about what it means when it's all said and done. And that's one of the things we're doing at Strategic Housing Solutions, which, as you know, is our nonprofit. We're trying to educate the public as well as even attorneys, because we're finding out that many attorneys have not been up in the weeds to be able to find out what all these things mean. So that typically when a person goes to an attorney, they will say, they'll get them in bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure, or they'll get them a quote modification. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to really see whether or not people have a claim against so many of these people who are foreclosing on them, because the loans were predatory.
So you're in Maryland, which is different than the state of Virginia. In Maryland, you have to go to court in order to foreclose. You're supposed to be given your day in court. You're supposed to be able to walk in with your documents. You're supposed to have been able to be given the opportunity of mediation. When you write a letter to the lender, they're supposed to respond with whatever questions you have, or whatever documents that you need to show when payments were made, what the interest rate changes were, what the history of the loan, to show that this person has standing to even foreclose on them. Because we have so many loans right now, it appears, that there is no standing.
Janice, this entire rabbit holes, the entire mortgage industry, this whole thing of mortgages, there are so many rabbit holes that when you go there, you start talking about one thing, and then you mention a word, like you just mentioned, standing, which is different than when we were talking about modifications, which is different than we were, and each one of these rabbit holes has tributaries. So that when you go down that rabbit hole, you go off into an entirely different thing than what you were talking about before. And to the average listener, their eyes begin to glaze over because there's so much to say. So that we have had at Strategic Housing Solutions, we have had to make sure that we stay in one little area. And we have honed that down to what we really need to do, what has to be done, and in order for people to get any kind of relief. Because when we start explaining, as you and I are explaining now, it just gets to be so many little tributaries that by the time we discuss standing now, well, we're off on a different trail when we talk about standing, which I would be more than delighted to talk about standing, but we were talking about modifications.
Right, which is modifications become the avenue you take prior to even getting into the courts.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The modification is something you would work on prior to getting even into the courts, getting into the mediation or anything. So maybe we should take a step backwards and talk a little more about modification and what your team and what your company Strategic Housing Solutions can do for people.
Well, you know, when you talked about modifications, you just mentioned something else, mediations.
Uh-huh.
Here again, now you're talking about mediations. And that I like to go there because that comes before the modification.
Okay.
Here in Maryland, there are laws that require, that give you an opportunity to have a mediation. But then the mediation is nothing that you learn in the mediation can be taken into court. And we have found, and our legal team has done almost 500 mediations, have attempted to do 500 mediations. And then the banks don't even bring the papers that are prescribed by law for them to bring to the mediation. And whenever we tell the administrative law judge, such as the case, well, it's like, oh, well, that's not really necessary. Let's just go on. But it is necessary for them to bring those kinds of documents into the mediation. So when they don't do that, then of course it's like they can check that box off. It's just as if the lenders have, or the person that's coming after you has a checklist. And the mediation is a checklist. They check it off, and no matter what happened there, it can't be used in court. They didn't bring the documents. They don't care. They just keep going. Checklist, that's done. Now let's move on to the next thing. And then one other thing that I want to bring out here is here in Maryland, we have a problem with getting a hearing. And a lot of times the fact that people don't get hearings is because they don't really realize that once they come out of a mediation, they can file something called a motion under real estate law 14-211 and do discovery. They don't know that. But recently we did have a meeting with the chief judge here, and they decided that they did say that they would put a sign up in the mediation room saying what I just shared with you. You are entitled to a hearing under rule 14-211, but you must file it within 14 days. So, and a lot of people they think once they get that notice of intent to foreclose that it's all over with. I've lost even before I even try. And a lot of them don't really realize that their loan was a predatory loan. And even though it was predatory, so many, if the courts know, they don't act like they know when it comes to reading the motions that we put in, that this is a predatory loan. And this person really was a victim of fraud. But fraud is a heavy lift to prove, but we don't have a problem proving that the loan was predatory. Under RESPA or TILA, oh boy, there goes something that even goes, here we go, off into another rabbit hole. So then here in Maryland and in Prince George's County, it's particularly bad. Sometimes attorneys don't even want to come into Prince George's County to even try a case. We had one case where we had one of the foremost attorneys in foreclosure law come into Prince George's County to try a case. The judge in his case was a judge that had been on the bench like 2 months. He'd been on the bench 2 months, and I'd wager to say he knows little of anything about foreclosure law, unlike the attorney that we had there who knows everything about foreclosure law. We even had a jury. When the trial was over, and we felt like we had a slam dunk case, I mean, because this case was selected so that we knew we would be successful. At the end of the day, when it was over with, the judge literally dismissed the jury and said, I will decide this case myself. And we're going to dismiss the jury so the jury can go home. Like, what? You're going to decide it? What do you know about foreclosures? Well, that's exactly what happened. And in conversations with the people that were on the jury after we were dismissed, they were saying they were all set to vote because they knew that what we were saying was factual. But the judge ruled against us on every point, even some points that we didn't even raise. He ruled on them, and so we had to appeal it, and the cases in the Court of Appeals, the Court of Special Appeals now, which is our middle court. It's a the Circuit Court, Court of Special Appeals, and the Court of Appeals. But that's where that case is now. But right now, we're really seeking to help people to go over their cases to see whether or not they have a claim against the people that foreclosed against them. That's one of our goals from the Strategic Housing Solutions, and is to be able to say, this is our goal. We want to be able to help people, and we'll review your case to see whether or not there's any help for you.
So you're saying in Maryland, and tell me if I have this wrong, that mediation, you have that before you have the opportunity to do a modification?
Yeah, well, you probably have the opportunity to do the modification before you go to the mediation, but the chances are that's not where it comes up in the line of check boxes, you see. Okay. You get the notice of intent to foreclose. And then you can go to a lawyer who can say, well, let's see if we can get you a mediation. But then you might say, well, I don't really want it. I don't want a modification. I want to be able to get a hearing because they're coming against me and what they're saying is not true. So then you can go to mediation to see whether or not you can straighten out those things. Mediation is but one tool that we have to use to be able to work out something with you and the so-called lender. And I say so-called because that gets to the issue you were raising about standing.
Right. One of the things I want to point out here is also you had mentioned that at one point Prince George's County was in the United States for African Americans, Black people, you know, the most financially wealthiest county. Do you know where it stands right now?
We're not the wealthy.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, by appearance, is there's been 65,000 plus foreclosures in that county.
Yeah, that's not, Janice. That's not counting the cash for keys, deed in lieu, and the other kinds of things that they offer you at so-called mediation. Which one do you want? How do you want to get rid of your house? Deed in lieu, check one of these. There's not anything in the checks the form that they give you at mediation that says you want to litigate and file a motion under 14211. The kinds of things that they give you this form does not allow you to say I want to. It doesn't have that as a choice.
So one of the things that through all of these big settlements our government has had with the banks and the billions of dollars that were supposed to come back to the homeowners to lower the payments, I've only heard it of one, and that was the person that was sitting in the legislature voting for or against laws that these bankers were asking for to give them more leverage to foreclose on other people. Have you ever heard of another one?
No, we haven't, unfortunately. We have not. I mean, it's really almost, it's just unbelievable. The numbers of people that have come to us, and many times they come to us, quote, too late, because they're not aware of of how they can come and to litigate against these things. But even if they do come and litigate, well, number one, we've had, I think, 1 or 2 or 3 hearings. This is all that we've ever had. And when we come to litigate, the judges don't seem to want to rule lawfully. It seems like they always come down in favor of the bank. I'm looking around here on my desk because I'm looking for a number.
Janet Phelan, who is also a person who is out there and fighting for justice and whatnot. She just did a video on how the judges are in the background getting paid off. And she has information, and in her video, and I'll try to find the link to that video. It's a short video. But what she states that she's found is these judges own their homes, and they go out and mortgages on the homes. And then within 2 or 3 years, those mortgages disappear. And then they get another mortgage. And that mortgage disappears. Now, I don't have this information. This is information that she's put out there. I have helped her research different judges and different houses in the Fairfax area. I don't know what she did with the research I had given her, and I haven't really kept in touch with her about that research. But I was just watching her video, and one of the things that people need to understand with the Constitution is they have the right to a speedy trial. They have a right to a jury trial, especially when it comes to your property. They have the right not to be in fear of walking into a courtroom and being treated unfairly. It's one of our freedoms. Now, actually, right before I got on this, when I was doing a little bit of extra research, I found this mortgage foreclosure filings in Maryland, a study by the Reinvestment Fund for the Baltimore Homeowners Preservation Coalition. Have you ever seen this? Kind of.
You know, your voice dropped down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Read it, Janice, because I can't say.
Okay. It's the Mortgage Foreclosure Filings in Maryland, a study by the Reinvestment Fund for the Baltimore Homeownership Preservation Coalition. And it's about 97 pages. I didn't get to read it all. But in the very beginning, I find it interesting because they talk about each area, and they go into the fact that the prices were higher today than 2000, and that they declined. And this was done in like 2007, 2008. But the thing that really I wanted to go over was the amount of money that Maryland has lost in revenue because of this. It says between fourth quarter 2006 and third quarter of 2007, the growth in Maryland's prime and subprime foreclosure inventories was more than double the national average. During the same period, Maryland's growth rate in the prime ARM foreclosure inventory was remarkable 211.1%, almost double the national rate. In some prime ARM foreclosures inventory, growing at 151.1%, also nearly doubled the national rate. Maryland's inventories in both instances were still below the national average, but the growth rates significantly concerns. The city of Baltimore, with about 4.5% of the state's taxable real estate property in Baltimore residents, will lose approximately $122 million in property-related wealth. Let's see here. These are just some of the things I thought were interesting, that they had 17% of its borrowers in default, that in Montgomery County, in 2000, there were 1,474 foreclosure filings. In 2005, it dropped to 829, and in 2007, it was 3,000. It goes on to talk about Prince George's County, with about 11.4% of the state's taxable real property, residents will lose approximately $310 million in property-related wealth. Now, this is 2007. So this is barely getting there based on filings part of 2007, with 60% or more African Americans. And then they go on to talk about how much money is lost, you know, for the government, for the, you know, for schools and things like that. It's an interesting, like I said, it's 97 pages. I'm only giving you a few of the details. I'll forward it to you. But it shows that wasn't even the beginning. That was just the beginning of it. So now we're down to over 65,000 in one county. We're not talking about Baltimore. We're talking about a county that has a metro from DC into it and is not growing. So when you talk about redlining, you're not just talking about the mortgages. They've basically put a pillow on Prince George's County and are suffocating it, it seems like.
Well, that's a very interesting observation, Janice, because I personally, we're like a 3-person shop for my committee. And so that a lot of those kinds of statistics and things that you have, I'm sure are out there. We just don't have time to find them because, you know, like we have been concentrating on solutions. It's one thing to be able to talk about all those kinds of things. It's like, now what? What about these people that are living in storage units, in the woods, in tents, with relatives, crowded with relatives? The generational wealth has been lost. The generational wealth, not just the wealth of the people who moved in the house, but the generational wealth, because wealth so much is tied to a home. And now to be able to take that away, it has such a domino effect on the population of the Black population that you really don't really see and you don't really think about. You think it's just the loss of a house, but there's all kinds of fallout because of that people don't bother to consider. I wrote recently to the chairperson of the Prince George's County, of the National NAACP, and I said, in addition to the atrocities that have been thrust upon African Americans after the death of George Floyd, and people were looking at it, there's one thing that people never talk about, and that is the loss of generational wealth and the loss of homes in the Black community. Nobody's talking about that. As a matter of fact, I look at the Urban League, I look at the NAACP at the national level, and I really wonder, why are we not talking about this? When you lose your home, you lose your whole foundation. You know, you lose your rudder when you lose your home. And so that on our website, we have a site like, where are they now? Where are people now? When I mentioned to somebody about people living in these storage units, they will say, oh yeah, I know that. And they begin to tell me stories about people they see in the storage unit areas where they are. As a matter of fact, I had some things in storage myself. And the woman who runs the storage unit where I am, CubeSmart, she said that she saw this same car coming in when she would go in the morning and review her security tapes. She said she noticed that she saw the same car coming in all the time after hours and leaving before hours. So she said she circled back about 11 o'clock at night. And sure enough, there was a woman who was living in the CubeSmart storage space. And then there was a story, of course, a few years back where a woman had 2 children. She had to go to work. And she had 2 kids who stayed in that storage unit while she went to work. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the stories that you don't hear of how these foreclosures have affected Black people and their lifestyle and the lifestyles of their children and their children's children. As I said before, they have eradicated generational wealth, which nobody's talking about. But us at Strategic Housing Solutions and the NAACP in Prince George's.
Well, and that's what I found was interesting about that, and I will send it to you, is it really goes into that. into the amount of wealth they've stolen. And to me, this all, you know, I know we're going to next go into solutions, but I just wanted to say this is, and it's another rabbit hole, but when in 2008, when this happened and the banks were taken to task, they paid $251 billion in fines. And everybody thought, oh my God, that's great. But you know what? You can't file a FOIA request and find out where that $251 billion went. That's all secretive. And so we have all these slush funds that are secretive. We had a national settlement that was supposed to go to buying down people's mortgages so they could afford to stay in them. That didn't happen. And now, 2018, 10 years later, we finally have the information about all the money the banks were given and where it went. And it went to bonuses. Over 5,000 of the top executives all got over $1 million in bonuses.
One of the things I love about you, Janice, is that you do this kind of research to take you up in the weeds, that every time I talk to you, I am just amazed at what all you found out with your tremendous ability to do research. You know, I am so much on the human interest side of it, where I talk to people and try to find solutions to their problems. But I'm telling you, my hat's off to you. You do a great deal with this research.
Thank you.
And every time I talk to you, you lay these numbers on me, and this research that you've done is like, wow, really, really? And you know what? I think that if judges and the powers that be, legislators, were to listen to what you have to say and be able to really be able to put that in perspective of what it means even for their lives. Because like here in Prince George's County, I will bet you. Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
I lost you. I'm looking at Zoom.
No, I see you. I see you. You're still on there.
Well, that is really something, because all I see right now on my screen is the word Zoom in blue letters.
Okay, well, just keep talking because we can see you.
I will. I'll just keep talking because I don't know what the heck happened.
Technology.
Yeah, I know. I wish that I had a 12-year-old here. So that I would bet you that so many of these legislators, you know, that they're just ashamed to talk about it, ashamed for people to know that they are in these states. But here in this county, I would bet you the overwhelming majority of these people living in the big fancy houses probably are similarly affected by these foreclosures. Because, as I said before, the majority of the loans that were let in this county were predatory loans. And so I dare say that they probably have a predatory loan, and maybe they don't even know it, or maybe they do know it, or they've gotten a modification, and the modifications are more predatory than the loans themselves. I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't know whether or not you've seen this book. Can you see this book?
Home Wreckers. I have seen that. Yes.
It is an amazing account of how this all happened. And then there's currently something I believe that you can get online called the Con.
Yes, and they actually, I've seen it a few times, start with a story, and they tell one story of a homeowner and plug in other stories of homeowners, go into the facts. They really go into the weeds. One of the people that actually helped with that is Mark Dam. And Mark is he was the Attorney General in Ohio. He saw the issues, and he tried to have a meeting with all the other Attorney Generals to try to, according to him, work in favor of the public. Apparently all the Attorney Generals got together, but as we know, the Attorney Generals all got paid off. There were, here again, there was with Lynn Simoniak, with her settlement, that's all now public, is it shows the states that were involved in it, which Virginia was, and I'm assuming Maryland was, but you should never make assumptions.
Oh, no.
But
I think all the attorneys general were.
All the attorney generals took money to stay silent. And again,
oh, I don't know that.
You go to FOIA request where that money went. It's none of your business. So what we have is a government and state governments who are taking big fines so nobody goes to jail. And then this money becomes available in a slush fund that the public never sees. It doesn't go to deficits. It's like a forfeiture. Like, you know, when police find somebody with a bunch of cash, they take the cash because they say, we believe it came from drugs or something. They never have to give that cash back. And they don't tell where it went. There is no, you know, we have so many different systems that work against the public.
Yes.
Instead of for the public.
Yes.
And then you get into jurisdiction and you think, well, I'm going to call my legislature. I'm going to call my attorney general. I'm going to call the police. And they say, you don't have a right to that knowledge. You get to pay my salary, but you don't have a right to that knowledge. So, you know, how are we going to make the change? How are we going to come up with solutions? And I know we both are looking for solutions. I mean, we've gone through a lot of rabbit holes here, and that's why I'm so excited for your company, because it's to help the people and to come up, because every case is a little different. Some cases have forgery involved. Some cases have loans that you can't find. They don't really belong in a mortgage-backed security that they're claiming to be a part of. So, so why don't I call you and I say, I've got this problem, Liz. Tell me how strategic, tell me the avenue you're going to take me on with your.
Well, the first thing that we want to do is to find out how we can help you, and to find out exactly just where you are in the process. As I said before, we have people really I just had a woman call me today. She's 2 months behind. Her mother died and she had some other complications, and she was 2 months behind in her mortgage. Well, that's kind of like a good thing, because she had just gotten her notice of intent to foreclose. What we do then is to be able to look at your paperwork and everything and find out whether or not what is involved. How legal is it? What did they do wrong? Did they do something wrong? If not, then we can go and look at that and then refer you to one of our attorneys who can look at your case and see how they're going to proceed to get you justice in the courts. Now, one of our goals, as I said before, is to be able to do this kind of thing that we're doing right now, is to bring up the subject to see if we can work with the mortgage industry. We got to work with the judges, because we've got to be able to find some way people get justice, because it seems as though that the world is not talking about this anymore. People just cannot get justice in the courts. So part of what we're doing is we're trying to see if we can start a dialogue to get this word out, so that we can start people talking about and bringing up the issue of judicial ignorance about what's going on here. And so, or to see exactly with the mortgage industry and what's happening. There's another rabbit hole. The mortgage industry, and to be talking with the mortgage industry to be able to find out, hey, look, how can we make this simpler for people, make it user-friendly, this whole mortgage process? But to be more responsive to your question, we would be able to refer that person to our lawyer. The first thing they do, we go in and we talk to our paralegals. And our paralegals, as I said, try to really find out everything about the case, because sometimes it's not exactly how the person, the homeowner, says it is. So they've got to look and see exactly just whether or not we have a course of action and what that is. And then, as I said before, they in turn will refer to the attorneys, and the attorneys will go from there in terms of litigation, or how they can go to your so-called lender. But in 99% of the cases, oh boy, here, this gets to that standing issue you're talking about, we were just talking about. One of the things that they will look at is the standing issue to see whether or not the person that's foreclosing on you is a person who has standing to foreclose on you, and a number of other things that the lawyers look at. One of the things I try not to do is to get into the legal aspects of things, because that's not my lane. So, but to answer your question, that's what we will do. But it's nice to be able, when people call, it's nice to be able to have something set up so that we do have an avenue down which we can take people. So, your question was a good one.
So one of the things that I like about your site, which is one of the things I like about my site, is you have portals. You have a place and a form for people to fill out so that you have some knowledge when they call you or when you get back to them. I noticed that you have 2 portals on there with forms, and for people to be able to fill out exactly and give you a little bit of history. And this is where I see us, how we work together and how we complement each other, is you have the portal of that. JudicialPedia has the portal where you can go in, put your case up, put your judge up, and we can find as many, through artificial intelligence, people who have the same attorneys coming after them with the same judges, and if they're having the same outcome, or if they're having the situation where they're not getting discovery, where they're not getting a mediation, where they're not getting a modification, because we have to have the big data. We've got the big data of judges calling us frivolous, vexatious with filings. You probably know some more words that you've seen people called in the courts instead of being treated respectfully as either with a lawyer, as a pro se litigant, which I would think a lot of these people wind up being pro se. They can't make their mortgage payment. They can't afford a lawyer. So you are also looking, I believe, for grants so that people who can't afford your lawyers would have one available. I mean, I'm not saying that you have them, but you do have the ability for people to make donations to you to go towards helping somebody that's less.
Strategic Housing Solutions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you want to share a little bit of that with us?
Sure do. Strategic Housing Solutions is a 501c3. And one of the reasons why we are looking for donations, as a matter of fact, I am literally in the process of writing a proposal now for donations and to try to get grants, is because we want to be able, we have attorneys that are willing to work on salary. So you think maybe perhaps that's not important, but when you come and look at the fact that most lawyers are $250 and $300 an hour, it would be nice if we were be able to have attorneys on salary. That way, no matter how many cases we send them, they will take care of them and for the salary that they're getting. So we need money to pay lawyers. We need money to pay paralegals that will, once a person comes in and says they have a problem, as I mentioned, that they can go to, we have a paralegal that they can just take all of their documents into a paralegal, have the paralegal look at these documents and say, okay, here's where this is wrong, here's where they did that wrong, here's a claim, and there is a claim, to be able to analyze the homeowner's case. So we need money for this. Right now, everything we do out of our own pockets. It's funny because before COVID, if I had a meeting with attorneys, I had to buy my own coffee and donuts and things like that. So Strategic Housing Solutions works out of its own pocket. So we do need money so we can carry on this battle. And the only way that we really know how to do that is if we have a grant. So we're getting our grant proposal together so we can go out and begging.
Well, we all know there's a lot of money right now for social justice, and this definitely, the housing and having a roof over your head, no matter who you are, is important. And so anybody out there, keep that in mind. Go to Strategic. Okay, I'm going to have a moment here. It's Strategic Housing Solutions Incorporated.
Well, no, it's not incorporated. It's actually, thanks a lot for saying that. It's Strategic Housing Solutions with an S, INC.org.
.org, okay.
Yeah, that's Strategic Housing Solutions with an S, INC. That's Ida, Nellie, Charles, INC.org.
Okay.
And the phone number, if you wanted to call and leave a message, the phone number is 301-291-5480. Wait a minute, hold on, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm on a Zoom call. Can I call you back? Okay, I can. I've got to talk on this one. Hold on, please, Janice. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and talk right now, and I'm going to talk more.
Wait, hold on. Talk calms as she saying that to me. What did you say, Janice?
I'm going to continue to talk because we have an audience.
Okay.
So the discovery that people have a right to when they go to a foreclosure or going through a foreclosure is very important. And discovery seems overwhelming, but it's not overwhelming. There's, you have a right to subpoena people. You have a right to subpoena documents. You have a right to subpoena people to the hearing and ask them questions. So you always want to be able to know your rights. And that's one of the things through JudicialPedia that we want to help you to know your rights. And if you look at our website, we have on there several different websites we still want to get up there, so we're also looking for donations and help. One of them is on foreclosures. We have ForeclosurePedia, and with ForeclosurePedia, we're not looking for you to put your case there because all cases will be on JudicialPedia, where we have the artificial intelligence, be able to look at the cases so that we can figure out if it's the judge who's not giving you a fair case, if the lawyers are manipulating what they're putting into the record, or manipulating what you're saying, what your lawyer is saying, which is basically created a situation where you're not getting a fair hearing in the court. And you have to then go back to your constitutional rights. The Constitution calls it, you have the right to a jury trial. And you have a right to, not only to a jury trial, but a right to the discovery and a right to a fair hearing. And if you don't get a fair hearing, let's say you recognize that the judge has not listened to you, that the judge has listened to the opposing side, has looked at their documents and denied you to submit the correct documents, then basically what you have had is your due process tampered with. But not getting due process takes away the jurisdiction of the judge. And when a judge doesn't have jurisdiction, all of your orders are void. They're not voidable, they're void. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but if you Google jurisdiction, what you'll see is jurisdiction has 3 legs to it. And in order for a judge to be able to apply the law, he has to have a sturdy little bench stool there with the 3 legs. He's got to have jurisdiction of the dollar amount. He has to have jurisdiction of the person and jurisdiction of the property. So those are important things to understand and know, because those are the things that when the judge doesn't have standing, and the judge doesn't have a right to make a order on the case, then you have the right to ask for it all to be thrown out due to fraud on the court. And that's, once again, it's very difficult to show. And we always have to remember, lawyers in our bar association judge lawyers, and judges judge judges. And so, and and all of them have investments through their retirement funds in these mortgage companies, or in these servicers, or in these banks. So welcome back, Liz.
Yes, thank you. I'm enjoying what you're saying. Don't let me stop you.
No. So I was just going back to the discovery, the right to a fair hearing, the right to a jury trial, discovery, to always remember you can always reopen in a case. Whenever there's fraud, you can, the minute you find it, you have the right to reopen it. And you have the right to point out the judge's errors. We're also afraid of judges because judges will throw anybody in jail for any reason. And so we all have it makes sense to be afraid of them, which here again, it goes out against what are the rules of the court. It also goes against our Constitution. It goes against our four freedoms. But with judges judging judges, you know, it's a real problem. But people are standing up and they're speaking out more and more in their fight for justice. So what would you find, Liz, is the reason most people in the foreclosures where the opposing side's lawyers didn't have standing? Would you put more blame on those lawyers who created a fraud in the court by manipulating it with documents that didn't tell the whole story? Or with the judge who didn't allow the opposing side, their jury trial opposing side, to submit their documents that told their side of the story?
Janice, it is just so difficult to really talk about. Every case, as you said earlier, is different. But we here in Maryland, we don't even get into court. You know, that's part of our problem, and why we had that case whereby I fought so hard to have the lawyer come and try a case in Prince George's County was because people don't want to come here, and attorneys, don't even want to come to this county and even try a case because they know it's useless. But then it's just so funny because half the lawyers don't know what they're talking about anyway. You know, like we have people who've gone, we have one man who went to see an attorney and paid $25,000 for the attorney to get a modification for him. I mean, a monkey can get one of these fraudulent modifications, one of these predatory modifications, $25,000 he paid. And then we have people who have come to us with all make and types of so-called help that they've gotten from an attorney who really didn't have a clue as to what they were talking about. Because, Janice, as you know, and you showed in your research, sometimes the SEC is involved in these cases, these TILA laws, FILA laws. Even someone was even talking about RICO laws that were involved in all these foreclosures. You have to understand that we are fighting a mighty, mighty enemy when you're talking about Wall Street and the banks. So that the nefarious behavior takes on all kinds of looks, like the judge that dismissed the jury, like people will come and the fact that their houses were taken and they didn't even know it. Some people whose houses were already paid for and their houses were taken. There are just so much that goes on that's bad, and it needs to be corrected because no one has really done a real slam dunk investigation and tied together all the pieces that need to be tied together, like the press, the people, the judges. Tie all of them together and say, look, we need to clean this up from the beginning because there's so much fraud at every level and so many gotchas for the homeowner. No matter where you look and what you try to do, there's no justice for the homeowner. So right. I can't really even comment on any special kind of behavior because that's what I thought whenever I got into this fight, that there was only one thing that was happening that the industry was doing, and therefore if we got rid of that one thing, that would be good. But once I got into it and started going up in the weeds with some of the activists, it's like, my God, there are so many ways that they're taking people's houses and so many things they're doing and so many laws and non-laws that they're calling upon and buying out the judges and legislators. We were, a couple of years ago, we had a bill that we wanted to introduce in the legislature. And we had a senator who was advocating for us. And we were standing out in the hall talking with him. And the lobbyist for the bank literally came up and right there where we were in our circle and said to this senator, hey, look, which committee do you want? We'll get you whatever kind of committee you want. What do you want? He said, the legislator said, I know, I'm okay. I'm fine. And he was very dismissive of this lobbyist, but the lobbyists had no shame. They came right up in our circle. They knew who we were, I do believe, and started saying to this legislator, what do you want? We'll get it for you. It's like they use their money, they do the campaigns, it's just so much that's going on until there's got to be a comprehensive look at the industry itself.
Well, the other thing that runs into this, I think, is the insiders and how the houses are being sold on the county steps. Who's buying them? How they're buying them, how they're not following the rules that all of us have to follow. I know through being at some of your rallies and stuff outside the courthouse and at some of the sales, that there are some predatory and that some of the lawyers that are in court, Troutman Sanders, or now Troutman Pepper Hamilton Sanders, is involved with a gentleman by the name of Michael Martinez, who harasses people. Have you heard of much harassment that once it's advertised of people getting phone calls, letters, showing up at their door, having their house completely emptied, stories like this?
Oh my God. I'm just trying to pick one to share with you. And maybe I'll tell this one of the grandmother who had her 2 special needs children. The so-called buyer, the person who said, okay, when you go for the auction, you got to put down a down payment. Then you don't really take the property, we'll tell you, till you pay all the money. This buyer showed up at this grandmother's door and said that he had bought the house at auction and let her see the papers. She didn't know how to interpret them and what they were meaning. He was there with 14 guys in a truck. And they literally told her to take whatever she could take, but she had to get out of the house right then and there. And she packed whatever, with her 2 special needs grandchildren, she packed whatever she could pack in her car and left. We have another homeowner who lost 20 acres of land and 2 houses and 2 tobacco barns, and her house was taken and her land was taken as well because her father, who signed a reverse mortgage, I'm trying to make this a short story, make this long story short, signed a reverse mortgage, and he was mentally impaired because from a car accident. But on a foreclosure, somehow they turned that into a foreclosure, and they went and they took her land, the tobacco barns, and strangely enough, there was a cell phone tower on the property. And the very fact that the cell phone property was there, the cell phone tower was there, introduced another faction into the foreclosure to say that the foreclosure that went through was illegal. And this poor woman, they put her out of her house 2 weeks before Christmas, and there she was, sleeping in her car in her own driveway 2 weeks before Christmas. Finally, she got, a church took her in. Other than that, she had nowhere to go. She was literally sleeping in her car, as a whole bunch of people end up doing, staying in their cars. That's just 2 I can think of off the top of my head. But then there was the other eviction that I like to talk about that was some time ago. This is way back when, and I don't even remember who the players were. But the sheriff came and evicted these people from this house that was illegally foreclosed on, and the mother was ill. They literally took the bed and everything out on the lawn and put the bed on the lawn and put the mother in the bed out on the lawn.
Now, were these homes that were foreclosed on by the bank and then had been purchased, and so the person purchasing was doing this?
Well, you know, Janice, here's the case whereby, as I said before, why we need paralegals to be able to look at these cases and look at everything that's in them to see just what happened and see whether or not there's a claim. All I know is the fallout from those foreclosures. And from what little I heard, knowing that nobody has standing that's foreclosing on these people, so that right there to me makes it illegal. But then to actually know all the implications and everything so that I could talk to you about the legal implications, I can't do that. I just know, as I said before, the fallout from these foreclosures that I think inherently, because of standing issues, are illegal.
Well, I think the stories are important because they're so unbelievable that people would be that heartless. Because the majority of people, my understanding is, that are buying the houses at the foreclosure are either the banks taking it back, insiders for the banks who then automatically get an insider deal, which I understand a lot of those are, some of those, I shouldn't say a lot, I don't have that information, are tied to the foreclosing attorneys. And then you have, I know of one case in Prince George's County where the purchaser of all these homes is a Prince George's County employee.
Well, I had a legislator tell me, we were at a social function, and he said, Liz, look, whether you know it or not, he said, I know that all kinds of people are making money from these foreclosures. He said, judges, legislators, attorneys are making money, making a killing from these foreclosures. And the thing that we are attempting to do, as I said before, we have a golden mind of educating lawyers, educating judges, getting restoration, not reparations, but restoration for these people really whose homes were lost to illegal foreclosures. These people owe their money. I just read about a month ago where the people who had made money from the Bernie Madoff fiasco that happened, that whole thing with Bernie Madoff, and the judges now, the legal system is trying to claw that money back.
Right.
If they
right. Well, they already have. They've sold off all of his possessions. I think that is pretty much closed. But, you know, we go back to the 2018, you know, the 2008 settlement, all the money that went to Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and whatnot, and the 5,000 bonuses of $1 million per person. The people where they're working now, they seem to have kind of switched over and are with the servicers. And we have to stop and think, how far do we claw back on them? I mean, in some of the old lawsuits, they state clearly these people lied. If you look at Public Integrity has done a 3-phase story of where they were in 2008 and where they are in 2020.
Is that the Center for Public Integrity?
Yeah. So basically,
hello? Janice, you're gone.
To see that we've got the same thing happening again, and how are we going to handle it? So, you know, Bernie Madoff, steal from the rich, give to the rich himself. A lot of these people steal from the poor to empower and to give further to the rich or to the people we need to pay off. to
Well, you know,
continue.
Janice, there's a reason why you have the one percenters. There's a reason why. I mean, even right down to, you know, like when you get a house, all the interest and everything is front loaded, so that they make sure that these people, the one percenters, get their money. You know, like, let's give me my money first before you get any pay down on the principal. Give me all my interest first. I mean, look at the interest on credit cards. I was thinking about buying a car, and I asked the salesman, who was a friend of mine. I said, "What's your interest rate?" He said 29.99%.
Wow.
I said, "Are you sure?"
That's a credit card rate. That's a credit card rate, though.
Credit card rates are 29%?
24, 26, yeah. 28.
Get out of town. Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
if you read the back end of it, yeah. I mean, you don't really notice it much because you only see that little monthly fee. But think about when you multiply that monthly fee by 12.
Well, the industry, the one percenters make sure they get their money. And interest is one of those ways. And interest is on mortgages really are big time. As I said before, and I keep saying, the whole mortgage industry needs to be looked at. It really does. And the more people really who join in with what we're doing and add their name so that they can back up legislation that we're working on, bring their organization and their group to say, look, you know, we're part of this group and this organization, and our people are being foreclosed on. We are really working right now with a new coalition that we've formed that is going to include the faith-based community, unions, everyone, to be able to back up legislation that we're putting in. Because when we went to talk with the judges were saying, a lot of what you're talking about is legislative. Well, it really wasn't legislative, but you know, you can't argue with the judge in their chambers. And so I was on a Zoom call also where there were like 3 lawyers, and I was letting them know pretty much what I was saying, what I've said today. And they said, oh, no, that's legislative. No, it isn't, Judge. But that's a whole nother story of trying to educate the judges. So we've got a battle in front of us because we can talk about these terrible things that they're doing ad infinitum. People like you and people like me, we've got to, it's incumbent upon us to be able to put together a system under which people can protest and under which people can really feel like there's a group. And so we're doing that as Strategic Housing Solutions, and you are too, Janice.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, we're working together. We're working together, and we have been for several years, you know, supporting each other, uplifting each other as women who have lived, you know, difficult paths at
It's
times.
about 11 years we've been working together now.
I know.
Someone said to me, Liz, are you still doing that? I said, yeah, I know. And it's like, you don't understand how insidious this business of mortgages, how it is, and to be able to go and talk about it intelligently, it takes a long time to beat the bushes and find out what they've done.
Right.
Because it's hidden in so many ways that we are unaccustomed to being able to discern, except you, Janice, of course, you find out everything.
I want to ask you one other question about the laws on the book and legislature, because you have such an incredible way of being able to say, okay, this is what we need in a law. It needs to be, you know, like 1 page. It needs to be enough that we can get them interested in it and get it done. But don't we really have enough laws on the book that aren't being used and aren't being, the opposing side isn't being held accountable for?
Absolutely. That's the reason why we're saying to the judges, the laws are already there to protect the homeowner. So now if you will just rule lawfully, and so then when they say that there's legislation, there are a couple of things that we need to do to tweak the existing laws. In terms of being able to, for accountability, to making the industry accountable. There are a couple of things we have to do. But then, you know, we've got to have the people working with us together, working with us to make sure that the judges listen, because we have been on several television shows, radio shows, and even yet these foreclosures keep going. So that's the reason why we have come down with a new modus operandi of how we're going to attack this. And one of them really is to be able to get the public involved and get the public and behind the laws that we are advocating for, that we feel are very, very important, to be able to get the faith-based community involved and be able, as I said before, for them to bring their populations, because power to the people. And until the people get involved, we feel like we're just voices crying in the wilderness. Janice, I have a 4:30 Zoom. I've got to get ready for.
Oh, no. We'll wrap this up right now. You can go to Strategic Housing to find more about Liz and her Housing Solutions, Inc. and JudicialPedia.com. If you've got a foreclosed home and you're in the court system, add it before you get that far. Add it so that we can share with Liz the different cases that maybe you didn't call her. Maybe you've felt nervous about having the money or anything in order to reach out to them. No matter what, you need to get your case out there. You need to be heard. You need to understand the process. And I have to tell you, she's going to be able to, or one of her group, so much faster than anybody else. So, Liz, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Well, I want to thank you. As I said earlier, I want to thank you for even helping me on your show. Janice, is very good of you. And just like you were saying to people, and I thought what you just said was very important, that they reach out to you, to me, here in Maryland at Strategic Housing Solutions with an S, INC.org. And our phone number is 301-291-5480. And let us know, let us hear from you, because there are ways really that you can help. We need voices. We need people really to stop being ashamed of where they are and to know that they've been victimized. They've been victimized, and maybe we can help you out so that you can at least get some sort of restoration for what has happened to you. Thanks for having me again, and I'll talk to you.
Thank you. And I think it's so important what Liz just said, is we're so embarrassed. We've worked so hard. We go out and we've purchased a home, and then all of a sudden the home's being taken from us. And we have to lose that embarrassment. We have to realize that bad things happen to good people, and that there is a way to fight the problem, to look at the whole picture and see if you've been a victim. If any of you out there have been a victim, please reach out to us. Let us know what's going on. And thank you, Liz.
Thank you. I'm going to run now.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Tell Nick I'm going to call him back for my earphones.
Okay, I will do that.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We look forward to reaching out to you again soon. We've had some issues with Facebook, and so we're going to have to see when that soon will be, but we'll keep you updated. And remember, JudicialPedia.com. Add your case. It can be for guardianship, foreclosure, any of these issues, and we'll try to get you justice by looking to ensure that you get, through our Constitution, a fair trial with the rights and the discovery that you need. Thank you so much for joining us today.